Ko rangi ko papa ka puta ko rongo, ko tangaroa ko tūmatauinga, ko tāwiri mātea. Tokona te rangi ki runga ko papa tuanuku ki raro, ka puta tira tangata ki te waiao, ki te ao mārama. Whano, hara mai te toki, haumi e, hui e, tāi ki e. E te iwi, hoki mai rā ki tēnei o ngā kaupapa whakahirahira, nā tūtama wahine o Taranaki e wharikihia ki mua i a tātou. E mihi kau ki a koutou, e wakarongo mai ana, e rarau mai ana i tēnei o ngā ata rāmiri. Ko Taranaki te maunga, ko Aotea, ko Kurahaupo, ko Tokomaru ngā waka. He uri tēnei o rātou mā, o rātou i taka te huarahi mo tātou, tātou katoa. Ko hene rangi Edwards tōku ingoa. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa. E te whānau, it's my privilege today to be with you, to tautoko tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira, ara ko ngā mahi rangahau, ko te ingoa he Waka Eke Noa. He Waka Eke Noa is research that has been conducted for the first time in this particular kaupapa, and we are privileged to have some of the Māori kura who have contributed and led this process with us today. For a recap, for those of us who joined us last week, we started our kaupapa. We just want to acknowledge those rōpū who have supported us in this journey, particularly led by Tūtama Wahine o Taranaki, also supported by Te Ara Tupu Pūranga Kura, Te Whare Wānanga o Awanui Ārangi, Te Puna Oranga, Te Atawhai o Te Ao, Māori and Indigenous Analysis Limited, Kākāriki Consulting, Te Whānau o Te Rau Aroha, Lalanga Training and Consultancy, and funded with by the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. Today we have the benefit of a wahine tino toa, ki runga i tēnei kaupapa. But before we introduce our keynote speaker for this morning's session, just some housekeeping i te whānau. So this process is a webinar. You won't be able to see other whānau who are here with us for this kaupapa, but please know 50 whānau plus with us currently. There is an opportunity to connect with us and share a pātai that you might have. So if you go down to the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see the letters Q and A. If you click onto there, you'll come up with this box. You can type in your pātai and press the send anonymously should you not want to use your name, but unclick it if you'd like us to acknowledge you and know that this pātai is from you. Our webinar is being recorded to enable us to be able to share this kōrero from our keynote Māori kura and to provide this to whānau as a support resource. It will be emailed to those of you who are in attendance today. Ka pai rā e te whānau. Don't have to worry about being on mute. Do look after yourselves e hoa ma in our session. And one of the things that might occur is that this kaupapa might surface some things up for you. In that situation, we just encourage you for some self-care. Hā ki roto, hā ki wao, tikina wai, te aki I a koe anō. But we also just share these links with you. maurioho.org.nz is a website with whānau-centred resources to support you to get connected to other kaupapa and support mechanisms. The Family Violence Info Line, 0800 456 450, and the website Are You OK? www.areyouok.org.nz. ruok.org.nz. Ka paira e hoa ma. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter today. And I am just, I feel really, I said to our presenter this morning that it feels like I'm at a hakari and we're about to have puruni. Aha ko te taumaha o tēnei kaupapa, aha ko te tino whakahirahira o tēnei kaupapa, he rongoa oroto, he nui ngā rongoa oroto mō tātou. Nā reira, he rongoa kiau, puruni is another rongoa that I find joy in, but rongoa, knowledge, connection, is a deep rongoa for us. So today, I introduce Rihi te nana of Ngā Pui, te āti hauiti a pāpārangi, tūware toa raukawa me mani a poto. Rihi has been working in the Kaupapa Māori research space for over a decade, committing her research ideas and knowledge to developing and empowering whānau and Māori communities to grow and maintain their agency by facilitating and building capability, skills through Kaupapa Māori research-informed initiatives. Rihi's also a practitioner, e hoa ma, and has so many more things, many pōtai and many lived experiences to share with us today. E Rihi, he rawe te kite I tō kanohi, me tēnei kaupapa tikanga and mā tauranga Māori, cultural understandings, e mihi kauana ki a koe, tēnā no koe, kei a koe te wā.
E rere kawana te awa tipu a mai nā kāwi manga ki tangaroa ko ai te awa ko te awa ko ai. E aku nui, e aku rahi tēnei au, e mihi mai o hanei. I tō tātou nei runga rawa, me nā kaitaki nā atua o te whenua nā koutou mātou e tiake I whāngai ao te pō o te ao. Ki ngā mate o te wā, ko wehe ki pairau, haere atu rā. Kia tātou kua māhue nei, nā whānau, nā uri o rātou mā tēnei te mihi aki, te mihi whakamanoa. Kia tātou katoa. Rua pe I te maunga, whanganui te awa, te ate haunui a pāpārangi. Me ngā te haua, ngā iwi, ngā puwaiwaha, te marae, ngā puwaiwaha, me te taura whiria hini ngā kau, nā whare, nā tai te mamaku, te tūpuna. He uri a hau hoki no te hapu o pare wahuaha, te iwi o raukawa, ki te tunga, ngā te waiwai, te hapu ki tukorangi, te iwi o tūwhare toa, nā te ihirangi, te hapu, nā te mania poto te iwi, ka huri aku kamo ki te nōtami ki, kai reira nā pohi iwi, anō hoki he uri a hau no nā te kuta. Tēnei te mihi mai aha ki a koutou katoa, ko au tētahi o nā kai rangahau, o tēnei kaupapa he Waka Eke Noa. Anō hoki he kaimahi I te taha o nā whānau. Ai, ko au tēnei I tēnei wā, nō reira tēnei te mihi. Kia ora, koutou, I'm just going to share my screen with you all. Okay. This session, the kaupapa of the session is looking at tikanga and how tikanga in the family violence space is understood and then enacted. In the end, tikanga is our way, is a rongoa for us to understand how we may support our whānau in the family violence space and beyond. So as I begin, I want to talk about tikanga as being customary, as being correct for our people, and as being able to operate in the right, best and most appropriate ways when we're working with whānau. Tikanga is our ability to protect ourselves, to grow ourselves, to be the best of ourselves. And in the space that we work in, and in particular the research that Waka Eke Noa has conducted and now is presenting in this webinar, and also has completed a final report, tikanga is about managing bad behaviour when transgressions are made by other. And it's also about the way we understand our world as Māori. I think one of the fundamental beginnings and understandings that we must all have a in-depth knowledge of is our whānau and whanaungatanga. And when we think about that, we think about knowing full well and understanding intentionally that tikanga is disseminated at the most fundamental levels, and that is in our whānau. And when that process is disrupted, we fall into spaces of misunderstanding, of being able to give pain, to give hurt, but also to receive pain and hurt. So, you know, we do need to protect whānau, as we do protect our own. For many of us who are listening today, it's a given. But for many of our whānau in the violent space, it's a memory that needs to be remembered. And we do this through active practice of tikanga and active practice of whanaungatanga. Excuse me. Okay, I can't really see the headings on my slide, so I'm going to go back actually. Yeah, whānau strength is important, as it is made, it determines intergenerationally the strength of those to come. So, and how we relate in terms of whanaungatanga is the active part of that. How we be the best selves, and sometimes the best selves is being firm and deliberate. Sometimes it's being showing nurture and compassion. Ultimately, if we don't have the opportunity to demonstrate healthy whānau and whanaungatanga, the impact is often traumatic, as we know, in terms of historical and intergenerational trauma, and it is detrimental to ngā uri e heke mai. This great plan of starting a timer, and I forgot to do that, so I've just started it. Moving through into ora and oranga. You know, for all of us, we know that ora means to be well, and to be well in its fullest sense is to be well and within the context of our whānau hapu and iwi, to be well within the context of our environment, to be well within the context of te taiao, the world around us, as we see it from our Māori eyes. I think that's particularly important, and as we should know that to be. And in order to be ora, we need it's important to think about oranga. And what is oranga when we think about that? It is about understanding how we move in the world, how we are in the world. What are those critical and conscious behaviours? And I'm thinking about karakia, I'm thinking about taking time in the ngahere. And for some of us, that's easy to do. For many of us, that is difficult. So when we look at our whānau who are detrimentally impacted by the inability to demonstrate and to be in order and to actively seek and prosper in terms of their oranga, we understand and we know that in that space and without those spaces of and aspirations, it is difficult to heal. So ora and oranga are another critical tikanga that I think in the end it's important that we share, we model, we demonstrate what is it to be in order as a whānau, what is it to be actively well, actively in good spirits and good health, actively demonstrating oranga. And, you know, most importantly, ora and oranga is, you know, it's fundamental to healing. And when you're healing and returning from spaces within the family violence area, in the end, our people, we need to be able to provide and support the many ways in which well-being can be attained and notions of healing can actually be lived. In terms of, as we move into wairua, wairua is probably is at the heart of being Māori and being well, but also importantly, wairua is about knowing that when one is in the practice of oranga, wairua is being nurtured. Wairua is also the, you know, wairua is part of us. It is, some people call it spirit. I think it's much more than that. However, and when the wairua is well, we are well. When we nurture the wairua, and for many of us, it's karakia and pure and being on our whenua rangatira. So these are active activities to nurture the wairua. Then the tinana and the wairua are in sync. And while I'm separating out these different concepts, in the end we understand that it's all linked, right? It's all part of being in the space of being healthy, being having the peace of mind of being able to relate well to your whānau, relate well to people around you. And most importantly, when the wairua is not nurtured, everything else is not nurtured. And so this is how this jigsaw occurs for all of us. that we think about, while we are conceptualizing all these things and we're talking about them today, they are all intricately linked to how we can be well in this world, in this very challenging world, but also how we can demonstrate wellness, support others to move themselves into spaces of ora spaces, oranga spaces, wairua spaces. We know that without our tikanga, we only have the mainstream state stuff, and for many years we know that is killing us. It is not a space of wellness. Moving into mana, we all know mana, we all have mana, and it is really important to understand mana, our mana, and mana of others. Because without mana and without people and yourself nurturing mana, the impact on wairua, the impact on tinana, the impact on other is exponential. So, keeping your mana, keeping your mana intact, being mana full, is a way in which we understand how we need to support others to be in the fullness of their mana. And when we think about the family violence space, mana is diminished. Mana is deliberately diminished, and in the end we know that mana is diminished. Mana is an output of colonization and violence. So as practitioners, as whānau members, to understand your mana and to look after your mana in the healthiest of ways is to be able to do the same for another. I'm sitting here and I've got all these notes in front of me, and this happens to me all the time. I over prepare and then I get to the space where I think about this, and when I think about mana, I think about mana of my whānau, and if I can help and support the mana of te mana o te whānau, then it places me in a space where mana, supporting and another whānau to enliven their mana is actually really doable. It's really possible. And for me, tikanga in this space, when we think about mana and we think about tikanga and wairua and ora, all those concepts, all those Māori practices, Māori values, it is something that we can do for everybody in that sense. It is difficult. What I will say in the end is that it is difficult for people who are in the family violence to feel and experience their mana being nurtured. So having a really good understanding of mana, the tikanga, and mana, the practice, the value and the practice, is important in the work in the family violence sector, but is important in our own whānau. Which leads me on to mana wahine. And I want to just think about and talk about mana wahine in that sense of, firstly, the importance of mana wahine, the role of mana of wahine to nurture tamariki, to grow the mana of tamariki, to support mana of tamariki as they move through their lives, and to really think into the tapu of mana wahine. What is the tapu of mana wahine? For many of our women in the family violence space, it is hard to imagine. It is really hard to imagine. So being able to articulate, educate, share the concept of what it is to be a mana wahine, what it means to be a mana wahine, is an act of providing hope, is a way in which we can address to women who have suffered in violences, not just family, but state violence and beyond, is to understand the tapu of mana wahine. And with like everything else, these are not, our tikanga is not done in isolation. They are done in very circular ways of being and knowing and acting. And for me, mana wahine is particularly important because colonization, patriarchy, violence are the biggest oppressors. Tāne Māori, Pākehā, Tāne Pākehā, they're the biggest oppressors in terms of mana wahine. So as we think about mana wahine, it is really important to be able to firstly know the importance of it. Secondly, to be able to enact mana wahine for self and other, but thirdly, to share and grow this particular tikanga, as it is a struggle that we find many of our wahine Māori and our tamariki are embattled with when they're in situations of violence. Most of us understand kariaroto as being that which is our emotions, and I want to just take a moment here to really talk about kariaroto in terms of Māori emotions. We need to know what that is. We need to be able to say that it is different to other types of emotions, that it is an integral part of our world and our lives. It is a viewpoint that Māori hold and only Māori can hold, and that without that understanding, we don't understand our Māori emotions, kariaroto. And kariaroto includes pūmanawa, āhuatanga, nā atua, te ira tangata. So it's not just about the individual emotions. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm glad, I'm mad. It is about taking the view that it is part of our own tauranga Māori, our own knowledge systems, and then it is we experience many of our own emotions. If we hold that premise, that we experience many of our emotions are Māori. It's not just enough to say I'm mad at you. It's important to understand what does that mean? What is the issue? How does the issue in fact impact on the person? How does the issue impact on the whānau? How does the emotions, the kariaroto, impact on the whānau? I think kariaroto is very manaful. It is really, it allows us to dig deep into understanding ourselves, Māori, in this world, understanding, growing the understanding of kariaroto mā tauranga, big key, and also what is the intergenerational understanding of kariaroto. So I think about that in that terms, that as you know, as a tikanga, if we don't grow this knowledge, if we don't share this knowledge, especially in our work, then we don't fully understand ourselves. So the depth of kariaroto is critical in terms of shaping the way in which we can be can be very Māori, and often in a time where in family violence it's very un-Māori. It's just violent. We can't think, but we still need to understand how our emotions impact on us in those spaces. For many, we know Māori as the life force. It is not, we can't see Māori, but we can feel Māori, and we understand Māori in terms of an energetic experience, and it flows through our tinana. Māori is in our kai, Māori is in the ngahere, Māori is in the water, Māori is is the essence of our lives as we know it as Māori. Māori for me is, and for this research, has been fortunate in terms of really seeking a meaning-making Māori, and I want to just acknowledge Tāna Pōhatu's seminal work in terms of Māori, as it helps us to understand Māori has many stages and phases, and we need to be able to know how and when and why we are in these different phases of Māori. Māori moe, Māori oho, Māori tū, Māori noho. They all play a particular part in our lives, in our ways of being and knowing. So, and as I said before, you know, for many, we understand Māori as being that elemental output of our wairua. Mena kia hiki te wairua, kia hiki te Māori. Mena ko tau te wairua, ko tau te Māori. So it is relational, it is human, and it is beyond that as well. In that experience, it is a human experience, Māori. It is not an intellectual experience. We know that Māori in our world is about how we are or are not, well, how we are not, are or are not, you know, being looked after, or how our Māori is being impacted, and especially in the family violence space, Māori cannot survive if we don't find ways to support whānau to move into a Māori ora. Excuse me. Tuakiritanga. I think tuakiritanga, when we think about identity, is massive. It's huge. It's not just my identity. It's my identity as a Māori person, and as I see the world through my Māori eyes, through my Māori lens. And when my tuakiritanga is intact, I have a different experience of the world, and then I can manage myself better in the world. When one's identity is deliberately marginalised or taken away from you, then tuakiritanga becomes a particularly difficult experience. We become tuakiritanga in its worst, or in its worst form is disconnection, disidentification from who I am, disidentification from me as a Māori, being almost like being distracted or disappointed in being Māori. That's a downside of not being able to understand tuakiritanga or to live in your own tuakiritanga. Because in lots of because the when our tuakiritanga is intact, our minds are well, our bodies are well. The notion of ko wai au is able to be expressed. The experience of being on your whenua rangatira, the experience of being in a whānau that is dedicated to Whānau Ora and their own oranga, is all part of strengthening and growing one's tuakiritanga. Waka Ma. Waka Ma is really been mistranslated for many years, and I probably am speaking to the converted here, and it does not help when Waka Ma is minimized into this notion of shame. Waka Ma is active, and Waka Ma, for those who are under or influenced by Waka Ma can often be violent, and it can be intergenerationally violent. So it is more than being ashamed. It's more than being withdrawn. It's more than being shy. Waka Ma is a consequence of something happened to you, and there is a consequence that you are having a lived experience, a lived Waka Ma experience. And then should you enact Waka Ma, and it requires redress, that's what I want to say. But if you enact Waka Ma on another, then those are the consequences that you place upon another and your own whānau. So it has this ripple effect, Waka Ma, and it is, I suppose, as a whānau practitioner, and as a whānau member, as a grandmother, as a mama, it is easy to incite Waka Ma, but I do want to say it's just as easy to address it when your whānau is healthy and well. We can't all be perfect, as we all know, but we can grow tools, and we can share tools with whānau, other whānau, about how to address Waka Ma, to seek redress, and what does that mean, especially in the case of when you have imposed Waka Ma upon another, and you have the ability to make that, to redress it, to address it, just for the, yeah, to support the redress. So yes, Waka Ma is really a big thing in the family violence space, because often, as we all know, is ever present in our whānau, who are quiet, who are reticent, who are feeling deep shame around the circumstances of their world. So as whānau members, as practitioners, the tools to address Waka Ma lay in, or the other tikanga, in tikanga, right? It's in the tikanga practice that we can see that we can make a difference. We can really change the way in which people move and be in the world. Yeah. It is interesting right now as I think about Waka Ma, because I can think of things that I need to address. And to me, that's about a healthy way of being. Oh, I remember that I've got to go back and attend to that. Often Waka Ma is a hidden experience, and for those who are continuously under the shadow of Waka Ma, it is hard to see a way through, a way beyond. So it is, you know, when one is healthy, when one is in the best of themselves and in clear states of oranga, those tools to address and to support others in spaces that are in Waka Ma are important and critical to share. And as I'm going to pause a lot here, because actually these particular understandings, and like Hinerangi said, we need to look after ourselves. So I'm trying to be very hold an academic persona here, or a very intellectual persona, but nonetheless, because he Māori au, he tikanga Māori tērā, they do still have an impact. And I think it's important to share that we can also lapse into our own Waka Ma, into our own pauri, where we're working with another. And so to be able to understand the transactions, the actions, the redress is really critical as a way to maintain oneself in an active space of being well, but also in the space when one is looking after and supporting and addressing family violence in particular. So Waka Ma, pauri, tanga, they all, you know, they all go hand in hand. And yeah, pauri is not just about being sad in the moment. It is a sadness that is embodied by many of us. It is the pauri of being, you know, invaded upon our lands. It is the pauri of being colonized. It is the pauri of alcohol in our whānau. It is all of that and so much more. So when we work, you know, we need to acknowledge pauri. We need to acknowledge Waka Ma with our people. We need to be able to also take steps to provide them with tools and opportunities to move through their pauri, move through Waka Ma. We don't forget the pauri, but we can live beyond the pauri. Okay, we're at Hari, so I'm Hari. And, you know, we say that, and we know that tikanga is he rongoa na tikanga Māori, mo nai tātou katoa. And hari is that experience of joyfulness, and it can be demonstrated in the way one feels, but also in the way others make you feel. So, this morning I send off, say goodbye to my mokopuna every morning, give them a kiss and a hug, tell them they have a great day at kura. And they got sad faces. And I try and be very hari because they really want to stay home. And I think that's important when we think about these. We have to be active in hari. It's an active experience. And it is also a critical rongoa when we're dealing with Whaka Ma and Pōuri. We also have to acknowledge that our whānau have moments of hari. And do we hear that? Do we know that? Can we talk about that with them? Because he rongoa te hari me te hari koa. So let's being hari is about being well. Being hari koa, and hari koa is an expression of that. I've got a timer on. I'm just watching to make sure that I am not going to go over or too far under. And I like the idea that hari is, you can be hari, you can know hari, you can experience hari koa in the calm and the peace of your world. And it can be, hari can be experienced in the good kai that you eat. And I know that with, when we don't have the opportunity, when we don't have the means, and we don't have the security in terms of housing or kai on the table, hari is hard to, hari is really hard to understand or even express or feel. So sometimes, sometimes it is sometimes it's a challenge when we're working with our whānau to be able to think about, for them to be able to think about hari and hari koa. And it's important to know that, for them to know that, it's not restricted to them. It is available to them. And also I believe that you can teach hari koa, and you can teach hari to be happy. And we can have snippets of hari in our world. We can't have it all the time. We'd be highly dysfunctional, I think. It's aspirational, and nonetheless, it is quite an important rongoa for us all. Many of us know whakahihi, and I like whakahihi because it is, and I think, whakahihi is about pride and self-confidence. I think also that whakahihi is, can be expressed in the same way, however we see it as being prideful or arrogant. However, some people come in, can walk, some whānau can walk, be in spaces where there's an idea that they're prideful or they are exerting a lot of confidence, but it's toxic, right? It's not a healthy way of knowing and understanding the experience of whakahihi. So, when we know and understand that experience, then we can really be able to share and share it as a tool, because in some ways and sometimes it can be to your detriment to be prideful and to demonstrate a self-confidence, especially in the spaces where you fear for you and your tamariki. However, it's, for me, we still need to grow whakahi with our whānau. They need to understand a healthy sense of pride and a healthy sense of confidence, knowing that they are Māori, happy to be Māori, walking as a Māori person, being a Māori person, living in an emotional state of whakahi is also a healthy state of whakahi is also a healthy state of is an experience of hari, and it's also a healthy experience within the context of kāre aroto. This is a this quote, I think it really expresses well the idea of what it is to be when one is when self-pride is in a good space and self-confidence is a good space, when whānau pride as well, when whānau confidence as well. And we're not misunderstood in that space. I think energetically we know when people are, demonstrating some level of bravado that makes one think, oh, they're a bit whakahihi. But actually that is a protection space, right? We know that. It comes as no surprise. And probably we need to be able to think about me pēhe te rongoa. And, me pēhe te take kei raro, kei roto I tērā whakahihi. Because in that space they probably aren't experiencing any, they're protecting, and their bravado is seeking to show outwardly to the world their unwellness. We're nearly at the end, but I want to just talk about tapu and noa. For many of us, tapu are those restrictions, those tikanga practices that keep us safe and keep us well. And and they can be physical, they can be metaphysical, in terms of the spaces where ritualistic karakia take place. But in the end, it's important to remember that tapu and noa are about restrictions and protections for our whānau, ourselves, our places and our spaces. And yeah, I do feel that in the end, he tapu te tinana, he tapu te wahine, he tapu te tamaiti, he tapu ngā mea katoa, and that in order to acknowledge that and then demonstrate it, we must be good practitioners of tapu ourselves. And that is being demonstrating it within the whānau and then with your own whānau, but also having the same experience when you're working with whānau in the family violence sector. More often than not, it is hard to remember or to remind oneself about one's own tapu when you're being beaten up by another. And so when we enact all those tikanga activities, tapu can be expressed in a way where it is useful, and it is part of a small part and a big part, or a big part in being in seeking some redress, or in seeking and aspiring to live in a space of ora. Tika and pono, but like tapu and noa, we know that tika is about doing things in the right way, in the correct time, in the correct way, and then it is appropriate, and then it is about the timing of the tika. I think that's really important for all us to understand that tika is a particular tool when we are demonstrating or being with it and operating in that space, is that it has these activities of right time, appropriate activity, that it's going to serve someone's ora, and that it is correct in its instigation. And when pono is added to that, then it is authentic, and it is genuine, and it is a activity of healing. Yeah, ko te kupu tika, tikanga mō te wā. What is tika for that time, for that horopaki, for that concept, koia nei taku tāku e tautoko ana. And I think that's a really good kōrero for us to think about. He kōrero Māori tuatahi. We all know that when we are able to speak Māori, and the whakaaro is Māori, the understanding is Māori, and the way in which we act being tika and pono is Māori. Yeah, I'm thinking about the song called Aroha, something I learned, I think, when I was teaching in a Pākehā school, and it's this song that goes, Aroha is something that you can give it away, and I'm going to say no, because Aroha is an action and an activity that we all need to be able to understand, and it is central to our relationships within our whānau, our hapu and iwi, and it has multiple expressions. Aroha is not this idea of romantic love, and aroha is active. In an individual, aroha can be expressed in terms of empathy, compassion, manaki to another, supporting, having a concern, a genuine concern. It is even in teaching and sharing tools and growing people's toolkit to be able to have and act in ways that are more aroha in their lives. And aroha is an expectation that we all need to hold, that we all need to be able to be in the world and show, he aroha nui ki te tangata, ki tētahi, ki tētahi. I remember, aroha in our family, especially with my kuia, never said, he aroha nui ki a kuia rahi. But she fed me, she washed my clothes, she did all the things when I was a child, and then she taught me how to behave in ways to look after myself. So she taught me karakia, but she also taught me how to be tika, a very long lesson, way after her leaving this world, but to know that aroha is about passing on knowledge and information through your through whānau, to your uru, to your mokopuna, and then beyond to others, to know that it is a tool. Aroha, like everything else that we talked about this morning, is a tool, as a healing tool, and it's not just a mātauranga knowledge piece. It is an active piece. Manaakitanga, what can I say? Manaakitanga, we all probably know and understand manaakitanga in action. But I think it's important to remember that manaakitanga is located within te mana, te whakamana o te tangata, te aki mo te tangata. So when we think about manaakitanga, it lives in te ao wairua. It also exists here in te ao kikukuko. And like everything else, it has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. It has to show another that you care, but more importantly, that they can experience your level of manaaki to them. And in the work, that is critical, because often they get you to, people will think, no, you don't care. So understanding manaaki and then practicing and living and doing manaaki is particularly important. Nearly there, hinerangi. So, manaaki tiaki is kaitiakitanga is also for us, for our world, for our wai, for our kai, ngā mea katoa. And awhina, the notion to authentically help another, to support another, and to be able to be very clear that your awhina is given without expectation. Your awhi is given without expectation, as are all the tikanga. They're given, they're shared, and you're received, and they're received by you all at the same time, and they're all without expectation. It is authentic, and it's that is us in Te Ao Māori. That is our way of being, knowing, doing, living. Kia ora. I feel like I have to hurry now. And like I've previously said, anō hoki ko te awhina he momo rongoa mō ngā tātou katoa. Now the final two is utu and muru, and I think it's really important that we remember these activities, because utu is about bringing transgression back to balance. So people in whakama require some form of utu. People who are pauri require some form of utu, whatever that is. And it is a healthy part of a healthy tikanga within the experience of being well. I'm going to look through that. Okay. And then finally, just to have a quick word about muru. And I like muru because I do agree that you can be very strategic with when you think and do muru. It can be beneficial to both parties. So it is reciprocal. It is also about public accountability. I think that's really critical. And then it can restore the mana of another and yourself. So koina te āhua o te muru. And I'm here at the end, a little bit over, I think. But I just wanted to finish off and say that, we don't have critical mass when we think about tikanga amongst our people, healthy tikanga. And I think there is the challenge for us, for all of us out here, is to grow critical mass and to grow it in the middle, in the middle group, which is not, our most vulnerable people, but to grow it there, but also to grow it amongst ourselves who have a high level of functioning whānau oranga, and then to share that and keep growing that, because without critical mass and without the conscious intention of growing critical mass, we all suffer. So, yeah, that's my final word. And I want to say, I've been particularly honoured to be on the Waka Eke Noa project. I received a fellowship to do my PhD within this research program, and I acknowledge Leonie and Linda and the others for allowing me to do that, but also to be part of the team. Nō reira, e hoa mā, tēnei te mihi whakamutunga ki a koutou, kia pai o koutou rā. Huri noa I te ipurangi, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe Rihi. It's not your kupu whakamutunga because we have a half an hour to spend with you, questions and answers. I just want to acknowledge your mahi and your kōrero. You wear your heart on your sleeve, and the fact, even though you're an academic and you said you have your professional persona on, we felt every emotion. We felt your ngākau this morning, and your deliberate and slow, your careful articulation on this important kaupapa. So, tēnei maua ngākau e mihi ana ki a koe. We have some questions that have come from our audience, but before we go to those ones, I want to ask you. You said about that sometimes we can have the disappointment of being Māori. You mentioned that you talked about Pōuri, you talked about tuakiritanga. How do whānau support their whānau members who are impacted by violence against their tuakiritanga, their mana, and their Māori?
It's really, it's hard for our people, for our whānau to return from those states. And we need to understand and acknowledge that. And there is a part of me that that knows as a practitioner, but also as a whānau member, that often we can be re-traumatized into not wanting to help, or not wanting to support, or not wanting to because they're quite, often there's violence around the other person, and it requires patience, and it requires turning up all the time, and that is incredibly difficult when you're dealing with our people who have been impacted by this, as a result of being racialized, or as a result of being abused by people who aren't Māori. So, for those who have strength in the area, for me, it's really important to keep turning up. And, and in the whānau violence space, that is probably the hardest space to work in, because you're dealing with that all day, every day. And we need to look after ourselves, because we know what we know what's in front of us, but if we don't look after ourselves, it can impact on you, the practitioner, you that person sitting with that whānau member. So, but I do know that many whānau don't expect you to turn up time after time. And it's in the small things, it's not in the big things, it's in the smallest of things, like, if you have taking kai or taking toys, or they're not, there is no the only healing is people healing. The only way to do it is through acts of aroha, acts of rangi mārie, kia tauti rangi mārie, acts of way and being, and showing up all the time.
Here, I just also want to acknowledge the whānau who stand in the face of violence, and call it out, not in terms of intimate partner violence or physical violence, but violence from the state. We have a pātai here, kia ora koutou katoa, ngā mihi rihi mo tō kōrero I tēnei ata. The question I have is from an anonymous participant. the question that they have is, how does the state-imposed violence, how does the state impose violence onto a kiritanga, mana and tapu?
Oh, how does state impose violence? Right. Yeah, all day, every day. That's all I can say. It is an upward battle for our people, even for the strong. And so it is in the way in which our wahine are able to, if they're fortunate enough to remove themselves out of a violent situation with their tamaraki, and then they are violated by becoming by entering into the state system where they are accused of not being good mothers. You know, they are violated when they can go play in a park with their tamariki, and people who just walk up to them and abuse them because they're wearing a mokoa. You know, the state doesn't look after those ways in which we can be safe. The state, I hold, and so do many of it, the state legislation and the law of this land was never meant to protect us or keep us safe. It was meant to keep us confined and restricted. And once we get our head around that, we can see the many, you know, the way in which whenua Māori was stolen from us, the way in which, you know, we've got a current government that is so dead set on getting rid of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. I mean, this is how the state imposes its violence upon our people at a macro level, and then it impacts us on a micro level. I'm, you know, in the argument around Te Tiriti, I'm like, they can't do anything. But actually, as an individual, I'm thinking, you know, they've got the law. That's their law. They're not, you know, so it does, the state has many tools in which it can continuously violate us through the form of colonization. But, you know, I could give examples for days.
I acknowledge the wahine toa, ngā wahine Māori who enter into those spaces to effect change as well. Marama Davidson and others. Marama was online with us last week, so just acknowledging all of those. And yes, mahi like you do in the research, how does research impact on these issues which sometimes can feel so unsurmountable for those of us who are just living in our kāinga with our tamariki? How do you, what is the impact of research in this particular research?
Well, rangahau Māori is a rongoa in itself, in that we can articulate and we can disseminate the what of it is happening, and then also disseminate how to look after ourselves and how to heal from that. So for me, you know, kei te harikoa hau mona rangahau Māori katoa. You know, without that tool, without the ability to actually put this out into the world, to have these webinars, to publish quite a significant seminal document like this, He Oranga Ngākau, and the others that have been done, yeah, it's a bit like, you know, it's now totally seen. It's now totally seen. And in order to have these discussions with us, you know, Pākehā and the state need to acknowledge their part in it, because it's all evidence, right? It's not imaginary. It's not, you know, it's not the notion that science isn't real because it's mātauranga Māori or anything. It's actually very real, and it's unfortunately a constant living experience for a large number of our people. So yay te rangahau.
Yay te rangahau, tēnā koe. We have another pātai. Kia ora. This is a statement and a pātai, and it's beautiful, and I'll just read it slowly so that I can make sure I can honour the kai pātai. He mihi mai aha kia koutou, e tākoha mai ngā kōrero o tēnā o tēnā ki te whai oranga mo tātou. When considering our connection to ngā atua, tai ao/tai ao, it came to mind about how our tupuna may have responded to the way in which settlers cleared the land without putting in place tikanga, rituals of intent to engage with the atua within those spaces. Is the research looking into the sense of loss and observation of violence upon our atua, which we experience on a daily basis, and how this has contributed to our desensitization of violence in general? We have the story of Rata, for example, which gives us an example of how a violent act does not achieve a goal and shares the implications of tikanga achieving harmonious collaboration with our atua and self. Your thoughts there, Rihi? Is violence upon our atua, in that sense of loss and observation, is it desensitizing us, and our desensitizing on violence in general?
I suppose that is the, probably the best response is really, that's why we rangahau. That's why we bring to life pūrākau as opposed to this idea of myths and legends. That's how we bring back within our world, our Māori world, the place and space for ngā atua mena kaitaki o te whenua. So yes, and yes, we have countermeasures to that. We are the ones that talk about pūrākau as, this is what Leonie's going to talk about next too, as part of her kōrero, mā tauranga Māori, but these are not activity, but these are knowledge systems in which we honour and we amplify and exemplify the way in which those stories have meaning and are meaning making for our people.
Tēnā koe. We have a comment from another of our participants. Whakahi, hari, harikoa, muru, using these as concepts. Ngā mihi kia koe, for sharing and bringing your new ideas into the space Māori Ora. So ngā mihi, Rihi. Just kariaroto, you mentioned many of our emotions are Māori. I thought that concept, that whakaro, for some of our participants might be just a new thing. What makes a kariaroto Māori from your whakaro?
When I said that would come back to me. Well, I think that it's to me, it gives kariaroto i te ao Māori he taonga Māori, okay? So when we don't have that understanding, we operate on those, those smiley faces. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm glad, I'm mad, and we have, there's no context for them, but when we think about kariaroto, we think about its whakapapa in terms of our Māori, as Māori, and it's really difficult to kind of find great English words to understand this, but they are our emotions as Māori. They only belong to us and not anywhere else, and when we have that knowledge, we are able to understand so much more about ourselves and so much more about the emotion of the moment, and I'm thinking of this quite funny story. So my brother, who lives on our whenua and he's in our old family house, he's always emailing us because the sewage tank needs fixing and all of this. And I get grumpy because I'm like, oh God, there's money going out my, and I'm a landowner, so and partly the house owner, with my siblings. And then I was with somebody who said to me one day, and it wasn't even connected to this. He said, well, our family home is the only family home we've got. And it just hit me between the eyes. And that was quite emotional for me, because that was You know, and that's what I mean. I had to remember my whakapapa in that one statement. I was thinking, oh, my father and his brothers and sisters grew up there, my grandmother, she raised, you know, so, but in that moment, I'm expressing the happy, sad faces, not really thinking about my whakapapa, right? So every time now he sends a bowl, I'm like paying it, like first person to pay it, because I forgot the whakapapa of the whenua and the whakapapa, my own whakapapa in that space. So that's what I mean about, you know, the kariaroto are about us and about how we make meaning of our experiences. And when you've got that, you have the ability to contextualize your world that way, your emotions almost, I feel like, you know, we give them voice in a much more honorable way, rather than, oh my God, he's just giving me bill after bill. So, you know, that's my example, I suppose. Yeah.
That's a beautiful notion of whakapapa as part of kariaroto, and you know, sometimes we might say things on the side like, oh yes, you know, used to be on the iwi board, you know, scars are healing. And then you think, far out, people might take that like there's something wrong with those experiences, as opposed to they are just what they are. They create a lot of resilience, and they, you know, all of those sorts of things. But you know, and I sort of think, oh Jesus, mana in the kupu, and how do we communicate something that is inherently Māori and other people might find raru in it, or even our own tamariki might feel raru in it, but actually there's oranga and rongoa as well. We have a pātai from another of our participants who works with tamariki Māori, and as a non-Māori, the tamariki are noting, you're not Māori, you don't get it. This is just how we are. When they're talking about conflict and managing conflict and problem solving, how do and as a kaiako, you mentioned that you have been a kaiako in the past. How did kaiako Pākehā working with Māori tamariki safely combat that idea, or support tamariki Māori in a safe, non-violent way?
That's a really good question, because I think, and I want to mahi to that person who asked that question, because many of our tamariki are in kurauraki in mainstream schools, and often, you know, violences upon our children in mainstream kurauraki happen all the time. And when you've got large populations of that, you know, being conscious, but also, you know, education is key. There are many, you know, many Māori working within the education system that can provide tools and training so that you can be a better teacher with Māori, tamariki Māori. I think that's the deal, really. If you can, you know, if your kura is invested in our tamariki, that should be a non-negotiable, because in the end, you have power over our tamariki when they leave their homes. And I know full well there's lots of tools out there from MOE, and I'm not a fan of MOE, but they've got tools out there. They've got Māori people within those systems that are trainers. So to me, it is a conscious, it's a conscious kind of pivot in a way. However, you can't do it without training.
Tēnā koe. We did have some pātai about, is pōri cortisol, you know, is there a chemical reaction with regards to our kariaroto, but maybe it's more the expression. How do we legitimize our Māori knowing and the way that we communicate our expressions, our responses to violence, and our Māori ways of doing it, to others who may describe them in more Western models or academic, in a Western academic frame?
Yeah, I mean, Māori providers and practitioners are just doing it. We don't have a choice, mostly because the state is deliberately under-resourcing many of our practitioners and providers. And yet we all know that we need to, in order to be, you know, I remember this kaumātua from the awa, Whānau Ora, at the final hui, he said, when somebody threw down a dead tuna in front of his feet, it was very dramatic, said, you know, when the river is sick, the people are sick. So, you know, I know that in the end, we have to do it for ourselves. We have to expect more from the state. We have to never give up expecting the Te Tiriti o Waitangi to be honoured, but also operationalise in a way where we have our own resources to look after our own people. I'm not sure that answered your question, and I could get a bit ravey here, so I think that's all I'm going to say. You know.
That's a point. We have another pātai, and this might be our last pātai for our session. Rihi, kia ora. Thank you so much for your kōrero today. I'm Pākehā with so much to learn, and I've worked with whānau and family violence spaces for a number of years as a practitioner, and now in a kaiarahi role with practitioners. I have some superficial understanding of only a few concepts you've shared today. I wish I had so much better understanding and appreciation of tikanga, and I can see how my lacking of understanding could be so disempowering and re-traumatizing for those I'm working with, and not conducive to supporting the change needed and wanted. It's really highlighted for me about how important empowerment is for whānau, the role tikanga has in supporting this, and also acknowledging that collaboration with wider whānau is so important. The knowledge and answers are there within. Ngā mihi nui. Rihi, that's a pretty powerful statement for a practitioner who's leading practitioners to stay. And that re-traumatizing is a potential of those who actually don't have the training. Where can whānau, Māori and non-Māori, because a lot of our own whānau Māori are disconnected or reconnecting to their own tuakiritanga. You know, who are some of the safe spaces that you think are where you would go, notwithstanding this research would be a go-to?
Yeah, I think, well, education is really important, and so, you know, I'm promoting te whanaungatanga o Reikawa and te whanaungatanga o Aotearoa and te whanaungatanga o Awanui Arangi. And why I'm promoting those three is because they're wānanga Māori, and they are deliberately premised on, for the most part, te ao Māori. And so in terms of seeking more information, you know, they've got courses, all of them in terms of in the hauora space. Yeah, I suppose a word of caution is don't expect your colleagues to do all your educating, that you actually have to go out and educate yourself. And then you have to have some level of education before you can have a conversation with your colleagues, because they're burdened enough looking after our people, and then they will feel responsible, if, you know, in terms of manaaki ki te tangata, manaakitanga, to kind of support you, but they don't have that much more to give. So I'm saying go to the institutions, enroll, pay for a course, do your thing. And that allows you to have authentic Māori people in front of you speaking about those things that will be spoken about and have been spoken about throughout today and the webinar as a whole.
Tēnā no koe e rihi o whakautu ki ēnei pātai pai, me o kōrero kua hora ki Wainganui i a tātou i tēnei wā, me ngā kaupapa kei mua i a koe. We're really looking forward to the release of He Waka Eke Noa, this research, and the chapters that you've shared or contributed to. Also just acknowledge the mahi that you are about to embark on, supporting wahine Māori, mana wahine, ngā kaupapa, well, you know, era kaupapa katoa I roto I te hi I te mana o te tangata. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe, hio te anō koutou ngā maraikora o he Waka Eke Noa. E te whānau, tēnei te mihi. Nau mai hoki mai I tēnei ata mo te wahanga tuarua o tō tātou wānanga. At 12 o'clock today, we have the second of our 3 sessions for today with Professor Leonie P. Hama, looking at tikanga, tauranga and healing practices. So hoki maira e te whānau. We acknowledge those sponsors who have supported this research to come to Te Ao Mārama, to the world of light for us. We acknowledge te tūtama wahine o Taranaki for being the kaikōkiri mo te kaupapa anō hoki. Kia whakakapi tō tātou hui I roto I te karakia, kia hiki te wairua, kia tau te mauri. Unuhia I te urutapu nui kia wātea, kia māma te ngākau, te tinana te wairua I te arataka tū. Ko ia rā e rongo, whakairi ake ki runga, kia wātea, aira, kua wātea, hau pai mariri. Kia ora tātou.